criminal Joe Arpaio. To claim a love for the rule of law when he signed a unconstitutional Muslim ban. They do not love the law when the first thing Jeff Sessions did as Attorney General was to pull out of a case against voter suppression, refused to defend voting rights in a case from North Carolina, and the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the law was unconstitutional and racist, and Jeff Sessions, one of his first acts was to take the U.S. Department of Justice out of the case on the side of voting rights. They do not believe in the rule of law. They believe in playing to their base through racism and otherization of people. It's important to say that here in Detroit. I called a friend of mine, Liz, who's a PhD in history today, because I wanted a historical reference to expose this hypocrisy of someone claiming a love for the law, but then doing the exact opposite. Did you know that when Mamie Till Bradley, mother of 14-year-old Emmett Till, who was tortured to death by white supremacists in Mississippi, in the Mississippi Delta, in 1955, when she arrived at the trial of her son's two killers. Is that a radio back there? Okay, well, can he step out? Yeah. When she arrived at the trial of two of her son's killers, she was immediately accosted by Sheriff H. Clarence Strider, and he said to her, "You are now in the state of Mississippi. You will come under all the laws of the state of Mississippi." He claimed that he was engaging in the rule of law by accosting Miss Bradley. As he said those words about the law, Sheriff Strider was holding two black witnesses to the lynching of Emmett Till in his jail without charges and under false names to prevent them from testifying against the murderers. So on the one hand, he was saying he upheld the law while he was breaking the law. He had refused to conduct any investigation of the lynching, though he was legally bound to do so. He had released the two white men on trial for murder several times without asking a bond so that they could go home and visit their families. He had lied on the witness stand himself. The point I'm making is that segregationists routinely decried nonviolent direct action protests as being illegal, pointing out that they trespassed on private property and that segregation was the law. That's an old trick, to claim that you're doing something because it's the law, when in fact it's not the law, but more importantly, what you are doing violates the higher law of God and are blatantly unconstitutional and a violation of the greatest promises of our Constitution, which is the establishment of justice and equal protection under the law. Segregation laws were legal too, but they were immoral. Even if what they did today was legal, and I don't believe it is, and what President Obama did was not illegal, it has not been proven illegal, but even if what Trump and Sessions did today was legal, it's immoral and violates a higher human law. And for Mr. Trump, Liz, and Adonis to say he loves the DACA students, but he had to do this. If this is love, I would hate to see how they treat people they don't love. President Obama's actions on DACA have not been proven unconstitutional, and we stand here today. Many of us have criticized not just Trump, but Obama, Clinton, Bush, Reagan, because America has too long treated our immigrant brothers and sisters wrong. It is a shame and a disgrace for a nation full of immigrants to keep treating immigrants wrong. It is a shame and a disgrace for politicians to support laws that if those laws were in place when their great-grandmothers tried to come here, they couldn't have got in the country. This action is immoral, it's inhumane. These young people have served the country. They've died serving America. They've contributed to this country. Many of them are in the armed services. What are they going to do now? In many ways, Adonis and others like him have acted more American than the president. And to hear politicians who have done so many immoral things. They've tried to destroy health care, immoral. They refused to raise minimum wages, immoral. They've not brought federal prosecution against people who poison water and poison children, immoral. And to hear those politicians say things like I just heard when I was leaving the hotel, we want to help youth, as one congressman said, but we want to help those who haven't violated any moral standards. This coming from someone who time and time again has voted on and for immoral laws. It is sickening, it is sad, and we must challenge it. We also must challenge that claiming that an end to DACA was done to benefit the economy and to protect workers is cynical and sinister. To try and pit these young people against workers is sinister. It undermines our moral claims, and the claim that these young people negatively impact our economy is a three-letter word: a lie. Trump and Sessions have been wrong on voting rights. They've been wrong on white supremacy, and they are wrong on DACA. Now let me say this to the members of the media, and I hope you print it. This attack on mostly Latino young people is racist. It is the policy agenda of white supremacy and white nationalism. Just because you say you love somebody doesn't mean you're not a white supremacist. Because if you say you love them but pass laws to hurt them, and those laws are driven by racism, that's white supremacy. You can't just say you're against white supremacy when somebody drives a car through a crowd and kills someone. That is white supremacy when the motivation was hate. But Richard Spencer, who's a leading white supremacist, said that what drew him to Donald Trump was his positions on immigrants. White supremacy is not just about interpersonal relationship and being against hate. Just because you're against hate doesn't mean you're against white supremacy. White supremacy and white nationalism has an agenda. White supremacy and white nationalism is against voting rights. White supremacy and white nationalism is homophobic. White supremacy and white nationalism is against Muslims and xenophobic. White nationalism and white supremacy support policies that undermine fair and just immigration policies. To do what they did today is to support the policy agenda of white nationalism. White nationalism, not white people, but white nationalists. Those who apply that, because you actually have some black folk supporting white nationalism. Because if you black and you support candidates and elected officials that support policies of white nationalism and you don't say anything, you are an accessory to the crime of white nationalism. White nationalism wants to see mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. In fact, they want, as you hear in white nationalism, they talk about race war. They believe one of the first volleys in a race war is the attack on our Latino and Mexican brothers and sisters. And so President Donald Trump is not evolving on DACA. He is devolving and leading the nation in a downward spiral. Taking DACA from thousands of young dreamers is immoral and a violation of our deepest constitutional values, which demand a commitment to justice, and it is a violation of the values of the Bible he put his hand on when he swore himself into office. Because the Bible says, when I was a stranger, you took me in. The Bible says that you're supposed to treat the stranger or the immigrant just like you treat a brother or a sister. And that is why if those who claim to profess so-called white evangelicalism do not stand up and call the president out on this and call Sessions out on this, I say what Rabbi Heschel said to John Kennedy in 1963. He said, if this country doesn't do right by Negroes, you forfeit the right to worship God. If this country does not do right by our immigrant brothers and sisters, you forfeit the right to worship God. The prophet said, take away your prayers, take away your sacrifices. If you want to please me, let justice roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. And finally, this action establishes injustice. That's why it's a violation of the Constitution. The Constitution calls on us to establish justice. This act establishes injustice. Governors, yours here, attorney generals, every politician, Democrat or Republican, along with every clergy person. And let me just say, so that somebody doesn't say we're only talking about Republican. Democrats, when you had power to fix immigration reform, you didn't do it. When you control both the House and the Senate, you chose to write off our brown brothers and sisters for your own political advantage. And it is time that you stop playing games either party. This is not about left versus right. It's not about Democrat versus Republican. It's about what's right versus what's wrong. And every governor and every attorney general and every politician and every president, a preacher or clergy member should stand up publicly against these actions by President Trump and realize that doing things like this to immigrants and other rising people is one of the first steps in the beginning of fascism. And that if you say nothing, I don't care what party you're in, I don't care what religion you're in, if you say nothing, it is in fact to be an accessory to this very cruel and inhumane policy against humanity. Finally, the members of the president's party, I've been hearing that the Congress people are mad because he put it in their laps. You heard what he said he was going to do during the campaign. When he was clear about it, what he was going to do. And so in large part, you are to blame for what we are witnessing. because you heard him be a racist and you still endorsed him. You heard him engage in hatred and xenophobia, and you chose partisanism over principle. Your silence then has emboldened him now, which means he alone is not to blame.
My name is Reverend Dr. Liz Theo-Harris, and I have the honor of being co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival with the Reverend Dr. William Barber. We are here to let our voices be heard, that we stand with the 800,000 documented, as well as the 11 million immigrants across this land whose lives are at stake at the moment. And we refuse, in our standing up for folks in the fight for DACA, to pit those young people against their immigrant families. We are here with the 11 million immigrants. Everybody who is trying to make a living in this country. Losing DACA will mean that 800,000 people will lose income, lose the ability to support their families. 700,000, 91% of documented folks are employed. They are supporting families. They are breadwinners. They are people who need resources to live and not just survive, but to thrive. And so we are here saying that we live in a country, we live in a world of abundance. We are a country of immigrants. We are a country who should welcome everyone. And so these immigrant brothers and sisters are our brothers and sisters. And we will be here decrying the fact that DACA cannot be revoked. And then we will be here when they attack other sections of immigrant brothers and sisters. Because this is the beginning of a larger attack on immigrants in this country. And we refuse to be disunited. We need to be united. The pain and suffering that is being caused, the fear that is being instilled because of this revoking of DACA is only the beginning. There are another 300,000 folks who have temporary protected status. Refugees and immigrants from Haiti, from Syria, from Honduras, from the Sudan. Folks that are fleeing hurricanes, folks that are fleeing famine, who are also under attack. And so we are here to say we will not be divided. That an injury to one here, Detroit, is an injury to all. And we're here to do more than just defend DACA. We're here to more than to beg for crumbs in a system that has way more than enough. Because DACA was inadequate. It was a lifeline for 800,000 people and their families, but it was not enough. We need real immigration reform. We need everyone in this country, however they got here, to have health care. We need everyone in this country, no matter how they got here, to have housing. We need everyone in this country, no matter how they got here, to have education. These are fundamental human rights. And we can have it. We have more than enough to go around. So why is it that Trump and these politicians have national health care, have protected immigrant status for themselves, but then they deny and demean people all across this land? And as Reverend Barber said, this is a moral fight. They are misusing, they are abusing our Constitution when they say that this is illegal. 100 lawyers came out with an open letter saying there is nothing unconstitutional about DACA. There is nothing. So let us not believe those lies. They are lies. We should say that they are lies, and we should understand what they are. So we are here to say that they cannot hide behind faulty constitutional arguments when the law of the land is to promote the general welfare. It's to bring about justice and freedom and equality for all. I'm a Christian pastor. I follow Jesus Christ, who came and said, I have come so that you may have life and have it abundantly. We are living in unprecedented abundance, and yet millions of our immigrant brothers and sisters, millions of other folks living in this country are living in abandonment and fear. And it is enough. It is time for us to stand up. It is time for us to unite, and we will build a powerful movement of immigrants, of people of all races, of all statuses, of all genders, of all sexualities, and we will make this country what it could be, but has not yet been.
Just before we take questions from the media, because some will leave, we want you to know our reason for being here tonight is with training in 2 states, Michigan and Ohio, for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival to address the issues of systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and our moral narrative. We're planning for 40 days of action in 2018 in 25 state houses plus the District of Columbia, which will include targeted and agenda-based nonviolent civil disobedience, where people who are impacted, not for the poor, but with the poor, and clergy and activists. And we're talking about doing something that's not been done in history. We know 50 years ago, Dr. King and others, Jewish brothers and sisters, Cesar Chavez and others, planned to do this. He was killed. But in our time, we must not only try to do what was done, but expand it, because this is the time when we need a movement with not just a rally, not just a tweet, not just an email. And we have to change the moral narrative. We've got to break through. I'm going to be talking about that later. But because tonight when we got here, and today when we got here, this happened, we felt we had to have this press conference at the beginning, because it's all connected. The same people that attack the immigrant brothers and sisters attack voting rights. The same people that attack voting rights vote against living wages. And the same people that vote against living wages tend to attack the LGBT community, Q community. And the same people that tend to attack the LGBT community also attack the Muslim community. And the same people that tend to attack the Muslim community also vote against health care. And the same people that tend to vote against health care also vote to defund and undermine public education. And the same people that vote to defund and undermine public education also put emergency managers in city without the people having an opportunity to vote. And the same people that do that try to roll back environmental laws. Do you know that the majority in Texas politicians called for rolling back laws and rules that would govern corporations before the hurricane, and now all these chemicals are in the water and in the air because in many ways they roll back. So it's all connected. And what we say in this movement, if folk are sinister enough to do meanness together, we ought to be courageous enough to do some good together. Would you hear But in our movement, we also put a face. We believe we got to put a face on these issues. So would you hear now the face of DACA, the face of our immigrant brothers and sisters? They're having a rally down the street, but Adonis left so he could come and speak to us and speak to the nation and speak to the media. Let's welcome him today as he comes to tell his story.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. Today, I start a hunger strike with dozens of other DACA recipients across the country. There's 5 of us here in the Detroit area, and we're hungry, not just for food, but we're hungry for justice. My name is Adonis, and I am a Latino, undocumented, gay man. And I am a DACA recipient. And I did not feel the need to be involved in a movement for the rights of my people until I personally got affected. I remember it was the same day President Obama took office, January 20, 2009, when my uncle was deported. And that same day, I did not know what to do. And I called Elena Herrada, who's here in the audience, to ask her for her help. And it was the first time that I knew that I could go somewhere to figure out what to do in these times of anguish. But it was too late, because my uncle got deported the next day. And that's when I finally realized that I could not stay idle and let the current people in power run over our communities. And I did not know what to do. I was lost in the beginning, like many of us watching at home. We don't know where to start. So one day, a community organizer approached me at Wayne State University when I was studying and told me, do you want to come to this training to fight for the DREAM Act? And I'm like, yes, I heard about this DREAM Act back in 2006. It's 2010, why don't we have a DREAM Act yet? And we're fighting again for the DREAM Act this year, which is just outrageous. But the training that I went to, it was an organizing training. And it's when I finally realized that people have power, not just corporations with lots of money, but we also have power. And right now, it's up to us to exercise that power. They came immediately after the election for our Muslim brothers and sisters, and we stood up and went to march in the airports to block the Muslim ban. They came after our sick family members when they tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And we marched and we went to rallies and town halls and we held them accountable. We held their feet to the fire and stopped them. And now they're coming after us, the DACA recipients. And many of us have been very comfortable with our work permit, forgetting about the rest of our families. So I'm also calling on them. This is the time for you to stand up and fight for yourself. Just like hundreds and thousands of immigrants came out and as undocumented and unafraid back in the 2010 to fight for the DREAM Act. We need you now. And we need all of you. We need all of you. We need to stand together, not just for immigrants, but for all of us, for low-income communities, whether they're white, whether they're black, whether they're Latino, whether they're Asian. It doesn't matter what part of the country they're from. It doesn't matter their faith, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Jewish, whether they're Christian, whether they are Hindu, whether they are atheists. It does not matter, because they are attacking all of our rights. And so this is a call to stand together, and that is why I am going on a hunger strike with these students, because I am hungry for justice. And I am calling on all of you. This is a time to call our congressmen, whether they're Republican or Democrat. We want a clean DREAM Act and a clean HOPE Act with no poison pills. That's the least you guys can do for us. We're not willing to throw our families under the bus by putting more money on deportations. We want a clean DREAM Act and a clean HOPE Act with zero funding for deportations. With zero funding for private prison corporations. With zero funding for private detention centers. With zero funding for the wall. Zero! And so I'm calling on all of you. I'm calling on all of you to support the strikers, not just by calling your congressmen and telling them that this is the least they can do, but also put your wallet and your money where our mouths are. We are calling on a divestment campaign from the backers of hate. Those corporations that are funding private prisons and private detention centers. One of them, JP Morgan Chase Bank. If you have a bank account with them, this is the time to switch. Jamie Dimon, we're calling on you to put pressure on your Congress representatives, your senators, on President Trump to pass this clean DREAM Act and clean HOPE Act with no poison pills, because we're not going to accept one more dollar for deportations. I want to end with a poem that's keeping me focused on the mission right now. And it's a poem by Ashara Shakur. And I want to ask everybody to say it with me. We have a duty to fight for our freedom. We have a duty to win. We must love and protect one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. One more time with more energy. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Thank you, everybody.
Amen. Stay here. As you gotta go. See you soon. We have to connect together. They're going to try to split the African American community from the Latino community. My brothers who are African American remember that Mexico was anti-slavery before America. They do these things, and all this revisionist history. We call people illegal immigrants. But I think the land of Mexico, Texas, and California belonged at one time to Mexico. So how do you take people's land and then bring them back to work that land and then call them illegal, and then once you get all the work out of them, then you want to throw them out? Isn't it amazing we talk about throwing them out, but we've never thrown the people out that hired them? Isn't it amazing that we don't talk about all of the money that is earned in Social Security that they can never collect, billions of dollars, that actually helps to support the rest? There's so many lies, but the greatest lie is this attempt to the supremacist lie to split people based on skin color. And I'm glad that Liz mentioned others, Haiti and others. But listen, at the end of the day, let's be clear. The two reasons, one of the main reasons they do not want to have fair immigration. Number one, if you have fair and just immigration, then those people can join labor unions and force the raising of wages for everybody. As long as you can have a group of people that you can push low wages on, you can hold wages low. Secondly, if you have fair and just immigration, then folk can vote. And the bottom line is, so much of this is not about 2017. It's about 2020 and 2030 and the changing demographics in America, and those who know that they will not be able to win elections in a fully diverse electorate, that extremism will have no chance. And so they're trying to lock down and lock up the democracy now. We know the game. We refuse to play it. We're going to fight. We call on every lawyer that can to join other lawyers that are going to be suing. We call on churches and synagogues to get your church sanctuaries ready to create a whole new group of underground railroads and sanctuary churches. And say, if you want to come get them, you got to come get us too. They can't get us all. They can't take us all. But it's time that we hook up. Come on. Arm in arm. Arm in arm. Arm in arm. Are there any members? Everybody in the audience, stand up, arm in arm. Let the media see it. They will not. They will not. Say, will not divide us. Across the aisles. Will not divide us. Hook up like a chain. Hook up like a chain. Hook up. There's an army rising. Hook up like a chain. Hook up. Say, come on, hook up, hook up. Move in the middle of the aisle. Hook up. Hook up. Media, do you have any questions while we're hooked up? Any members of the media? Say, this is what democracy looks like. We hook up. We ain't going nowhere. Former slaves, we ain't going nowhere. White brothers and sisters who have stood in the tradition of the abolitionists, we ain't going nowhere. First Nation, we ain't going nowhere. Latinos and Haitians and other immigrants, we aren't going anywhere. I got proper on you since I was in college. This is our land. Nobody's going to tear us away from it. Media, do you have any questions? All right. A picture speaks 1,000 words. Put your hands together. I feel like putting some joy in the room. Come on, put your hands together. Put your hands together. Somebody say, forward together. Not one step back. Forward together. Not one step back. Forward together. Forward together. Forward together. Forward together. Forward together. Not one step back. When I say justice, you say justice. 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 When I say justice, you say justice. 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 All right, all right. We're going to turn the program around just a little bit. I'm going to change a couple of things. I want to invite Miss Yara Allen, who is the theomusicology of Repairers of the Breach, who moves all over the country and leads us in the tradition of Bernice Reagan and others to come at this time. And she's going to lead us in at least one song. She may do two if y'all clap and move real hard. And then we're going to bring up Sister Maureen Taylor, and we're going to move through our time together tonight. But I believe it's time for us to put our hands together. It's time for us to sing some going to fight songs. You know, when you're going to fight, you got to have a song. So everybody can become one somebody. Where's Yara? Come take this mic. Is this the mic you want?
Good evening, everybody. All right. It's kind of hot in here. Amen. I'm not talking about the temperature either. So we're going to sing a little bit together tonight. Are you ready for that? Yes. Are you fired up? Yes. Are you ready to go? Yes. Are you fired up? Yes. Are you ready to sing? Yes. All right. Oh, some of you said, Now, don't take it personal, okay? But this is something we just have to do. We just have to check the room. Everywhere we go, we do it, okay? It's not just you. Where are the altos in this room? Where are the tenors in this room? Where are the sopranos in this room? Where are the bass baritones in this room? And so where are those of you who are sliding up and down that scale at all, just all over the place? Just all over the place. All right, we're gonna find a place for you tonight. If you're standing beside somebody who is sliding up and down the scale, grab them, love them, lend them your note, just don't expect it back in the same way you lend it. It's not gonna happen. This is where you're gonna have unconditional love, okay? I want you to stand. And we say all over the country that we stand together because we stand together. All right? Now, I just want to do a little music housekeeping and just say, we clap on the and. That's all I'm saying. 1 and 2 and 3 and 2 and. That's it. You've already passed that course. So we're ready. We're ready now, right? So let's start with a song that was a part of our, that's it, keep it going, that's all right. That's a part of our civil rights history. But before I start, we don't do this right here. We don't do that standalone thing. And so what I want is for the participants or the attendees of the training today to join me. Ah, nobody told me about that. That's okay, come on. And then I'm gonna invite you to sing with us if you look up here and you see that you're not represented. So we definitely wanna see some young people. Wherever you are, we need some young blood up here. Whatever you see that needs to be filled in, please fill it in. Come on, move quickly, move quickly. And then let's tighten it in. We don't want to spread too far down because we're practicing right now what just happened in this room, and that's that collective effervescence. It's what happens when we all get together and that energy that's created from us being together. All right. Here we go. I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. You know, I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. I said, hold it, hold it. Okay, so now here's what happens when we sing this song sometimes. We hear, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. And that's all right. I'm not telling you that you can't wake up with your mind stayed on Jesus. But for the sake of the movement, somebody along the way tweaked it so everybody could sing it. And so we're singing, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. And we know that Jesus was about freedom, so don't feel slighted, right? Okay, can we try it again this time? Stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. You know, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I said I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Oh, we're not done. Come on back, choir. Is the choir? See, this is not one of those one-hit wonder things. You can't leave after that one hit. Come on. This little light of mine. Oh, oh, this little light of mine. This little light of Thank you. Put your hands together for the choir. Now how about a little something for the band?
Well, listen, some of the folks that came in this room earlier today, they were on walkers and looked like they could walk. Some of the people came in this room today had on glasses because they couldn't see. They done threw the glasses down. Lord have mercy. I don't know what other kind of miracles about to happen up in here. We will ask our next three speakers, because we're going to give the Reverend a couple more seconds to get a little bit of a rest. Jill, Rabbi Alana, and Imam Khalil. Would you three please come up? We thought it would be important if we bring a prayer, short prayer, for a successful evening and successful outcomes. And we're going to have at least three people here today that can pray in three different kinds of thinking, and it all going to the same place. Hey, you know, this Reverend Jill, she'll start first. She'll tell you what church she belongs to, and then we're going to move it right along.
Good evening. My name is Jill Sundell, and I am the pastor at Central United Methodist Church here in the great city of Detroit. Woo! Will you join with me in prayer? Gracious God, we come before you tonight seeking your presence. We need to feel you in a powerful way. You see, our hearts are heavy. Our voices are strained, our feet are tired. Our spirits long to be filled, and so we come before you with open hearts and open minds, looking for your voice to be heard in this place. These are dangerous times we're living in. We're under the leadership of an immoral man who has taken this country hostage and who is building walls both literally and figuratively all over the United States. This is a man who is making sure that the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, then never the two will meet. He threatens deportation to the most vulnerable among us. And today he even threatened the children and young adults who are dreaming of a better life. People who followed what the government told them to do, who had a president who was giving them a chance at a better life, and today that was all thrown away. People are scared, families are being ripped apart. Oh God, you know this is a man who has demonized the Muslim faith and tried to make the peaceful religion the scapegoat for every violent act in America, when we know that white men have created far more terror in this country. This is a man who supported white supremacists and Nazis. Oh God, your people need your help. People are suffering. People are starving, and people are having their water turned off and their houses foreclosed on. It's the 50th year of the rebellion, and yet when we look at our neighborhoods, not much has changed. So tonight we gather, oh God, to hear your word for us. We know that you said, by our deeds we shall be made known. Now is not the time for silence. Now is the time for action. Now is the time to start flipping over some tables of injustice. Now is the time for us to be sanctuary for the least of these, our brothers and sisters. We know that you have gathered us together tonight for such a time as this. And for that we give you thanks. Pour out your mighty spirit upon each and every one of us, so that when we leave this place, we will be emboldened by your power and your might, and that nothing will be able to stop this movement called the Poor People's Campaign. We pray this in the name of our God of many names. Amen.
Good evening. So Jews we're not crazy about praying in public, but we do like to tell stories. So I'm going to tell a story about the Poor People's Campaign. So when the Poor People's Campaign came to Washington, D.C., in 1968, 49 years ago, they approached a Jewish community center located downtown, asking if the building's showers could be made available. The request was denied. The story could have ended there, but it didn't. A group of young activists known as Jews for Urban Justice threatened a pray-in. They were going to take over the building and pray, and who knows? They didn't even have to do it. They just threatened, and the building was opened for the Poor People's Campaign to use. Now, this is a victory, on a small level in terms of some structural support for the Poor People's Campaign, right? A small victory. But it means much more to me than that. It means that ancient tradition can be harnessed, and radical youth can push their communities to participate in the most important movement work of their time. It was this action, this demonstration, almost demonstration, that brought New Left activist Arthur Waskow into relationship with his Judaism. He'd been an activist for many years, alienated from Judaism, and this compelled him. He later went on to become a rabbi. 35 years later, Rabbi Waskow's teachings compelled me to not give up on my community and my tradition. And here I am, 15 years later, after discovering his teachings, leading a new organization, Detroit Jews for Justice, inspired by the legacy of Jews for Urban Justice, who 50 years ago forced their community to share resources with the Poor People's Campaign. Lador Vador, from generation to generation, who knows what chain of events may grow from the brave actions that we take today. Today we are called to this new iteration of a movement launched 50 years ago. It's also a tender and powerful moment in the city of Detroit, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the rebellion. 50 years. 50 years is Jubilee. A time of radical renewal. On the Jubilee, we blow the shofar. We blow the shofar to announce a new era. My tradition teaches that there were 10 things that were created bein hashmashot, on the eve of the first Sabbath at twilight, in this liminal moment just before the first Sabbath. In between that moment of the days of struggle, the 6 days of struggle, and the day of peace, God creates the ram. The ram is created in that magical moment. Why? Why the ram? When the biblical God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son, it seems inevitable. Abraham can see no other way. It isn't until his child is bound on the altar that he looks up to see a ram caught in the thicket. And not just any ram, the tradition says, the primordial ram, the ram that was there all along, if he would only look to see it. The shofar announcing the 50th year calls us back to that moment of seeing, of realization that there is another way. We are not bound to a fate outside of our control. The ram was always there, hiding just out of sight. There is an alternative, a better ending, a new beginning, a chance to change course. There are forces that want us to believe that things will always be this way, that the giant triplets of racism, militarism, and materialism are essential to who we are as human beings, but it's not true. The economic systems we live in are not natural. They did not have to be. We sound the shofar to cry, there is another way. The prophet Isaiah calls to us, Kra v'gar'on el tachsof k'shofar harem kolech. Cry out full-throated. Don't hold back. Lift your voice like a shofar. We cry out that another world is possible. May we be blessed to help bring it about. Amen.
I am truly humbled and honored to address a group of individuals who are committed and who are courageous. I sense the same courage that our brother David had when he faced the giant Goliath. And we face a giant. Let's make no mistake. His courage and his faith helped him to defeat that giant. So I greet each and every one of you. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah. Which simply means, for those who don't know, may God's peace be with you. Thank you. I would like to recite the opening chapter of the Holy Quran in the original Arabic, which is called Fusa. And I would like to ask each and every one of you to listen with your heart. Modern science has determined that there are neurons in the heart. The heart is a sentient being. Hearts get broken. Hearts get hurt. Hearts feel. So I ask you to indulge me and listen with your heart. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. May God bless you all.
Well, if that didn't wake you up, we didn't call everybody. We called them all now. Alrighty, we're going to have a local pastor come around and give us a couple of words here. Please welcome Eileen.
Thank you for that promotion, but I am not a local pastor. I am Eileen Hayes. I am the Executive Director for Michigan Faith in Action, and it has been our pleasure to work with this planning committee, this awesome planning committee, to bring this mass meeting here today, along with the Michigan Welfare Rights Association, Sugar Law, activists, people who love justice just like all of you. And so as much as we love it, is as much as we welcome all of you here today. So that is my task, is to make sure, and I think, is there anybody right now who has not already felt the love of welcome? And I just want to make sure I make a special plea just to you. I'll come to you personally if you have not been welcomed. But I think that you have seen the compassion of what it's like when we all work together on one accord, and that's why we're here, and that's why we welcome you here today for our work. Thank you.
Alrighty, a lot of words have been said, several songs have been sung, and we're going to bring today a special person, a member of Welfare Rights, who is a speaker of words. Please welcome Ryder Bush.
Decoding the Constitution. Someone is pitting us one against the other. Father against mother, against sister, against brother. The enemy is the same. There has never been another. The battle up north is the same one that's southern. Get organized, get involved, don't sideline, don't hover. We want each generation to be so much better than the one before it. So we work hard, endure so much, and we say that for the next one, praying they'll be the blessed ones. Lord, please let these kids that are dying be the last ones. We the people, in order to form a more perfect, we the people are out of order. There'll be walls in every inner city. They won't just stop at the border. We the people must come together, must treat each other better, must march in both fair and foul weather, must break this low expectation tether, must act like the time is now or never. Detroit, the vanguard of workers' unions, prove that the rights of the poor and the rights of workers are the same. Our only solution is mind revolution. We must learn the game to beat the game and break the game. Domestic tranquility will only come when we the people have unity and equality and pay parity. Migrant farm workers, auto workers, service workers, municipal workers, healthcare workers, and all kinds of other workers come together and unite. Rewrite your history. They surgically divide us like cellular mitosis. We think the race is locked, but we never guess its closeness. If one doesn't vote, then for all of us it's hopeless. Whether you're a communist or better yet a socialist, or don't vote, don't care, no matter what the issue is, or want to vote, but damn it, Bernie Sanders didn't make the list. Racist, redneck, or even Union Blue nationalists, or fist-pumping, drag-goring, Black Lives activists, or spinning around in the idiot box of no interest, or maybe you're a centrist, but didn't we see you marching with tiki lamps on Twitter and Pinterest? Whatever the case is, this movement has a space for you. This is our olive branch. Join us on the front lines of civil disobedience. North Carolina, a bellwether for our nation. Anti-immigration and sexual discrimination. Racism and suppression of voter registration. Huddled masses facing economic castration. But the poor people's train has just left the station. And activists everywhere feel reanimation. Sometimes, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for the people to create a political system that respects equality and the sanctity of life to which people are entitled. Those are their words, I'm sure you've heard it. The Founding Fathers said and signed them. But a brother like me needs a picture ID to sign my name behind them. Voting should be on a national holiday or be inaccessible the whole day. The Electoral College never pays attention anyway. Meanwhile, every day, Miss Jackson has to wake the kids, watch the kids, dress for work, go to work, get off work, cook for the kids, get off work. Stop! Wasn't she supposed to stand in line outside the neighborhood that stretched for blocks and vote? Equalize voter rights. They're a targeted attack upon the rights of voters. That's taxation without representation. That their justification doesn't disguise their true ideology. That's not hospitality, that's Southern strategy. Attacks on water rights, welfare rights, infrastructure, all this fracking. How we're acting is an international disgrace. As some rush to obliterate from these teeming shores all but runways where dreamer children have no place. The clock has run out on the collective silence. We need to meet more often than just today. We need every moment of every day. We need a Moral Monday, a Takeover Tuesday, a Welfare Wednesday, a Thirsty People Thursday, a Frontline Friday, a Sick of Shooting Saturday, and a Sabbath Sunday too, but that day has been reserved for a few millenniums. Learn and then assert your rights. Stop being an outsider, an observer, a punching bag, a punchline, an endangered species. We are one. If we say boycott, don't get on the news and list all the reasons why you're ignoring the boycott. Support, support. As an individual, you get nada. You know this. You could have been shot coming here. Yesterday, you could have been shot driving anywhere in the USA with no consequences. And I mean literally yesterday. And tomorrow ain't here yet. Whether we rise or fall, we will do so as one. E pluribus unum, out of many, one people. Teach them to have pride. Teach them, reach out to the children. Teach them that we're lions, not jackals. Break those spiritual shackles. Can't you see? It's like the man said, the truth is ridiculed and violently opposed. Those granted college regurgitate this knowledge, but that first pledge was not ridiculed. It was made with a solemn hand on our hearts, or we ended up in a corner with our noses smashed flat and our vision blurred, till we recited these sacred words. I pledge indignance to the flag of the divided states of America and to the Republicans for which we work, one nation, unafraid of God, homeless, invisible, with liberty and justice for those who can afford it. Can't you see? Can't you see the truth is ridiculed? Congress is a fool, politics are a sham, so I just hide behind the tears of a clown. I only watch TV when I'm wasted, cause talking heads are two-faced. The news is renewed, repackaged, replaced it. It's poison Kool-Aid. Why can't you taste it? It's time for our news, our own TV, with people who look, talk, and act like me, whose cities were legally jacked like me, whose heads were literally cracked like me. Oh, say, brother, man, can't you see by the dawn's early nightstick? Economic nightsticks crack our head till we wake from a coma, homeless or dead. But I won't go quiet, no, I won't go quiet. I refuse to be silent. I rebel with a raised fist. Drink your Kool-Aid and smile, but don't forget that you heard this, America.
For those of you that are not from this area, I have one thing to tell you. Welcome to Detroit. Many years ago, Marion and I were involved with whatever the demonstration was. We've been fighting this question of poverty, against poverty, for a long time. And we ran across a young lady and talked with her about some things, and she seemed like she had her head on straight. So we told her, get in the car. Come on, we'll just go somewhere and talk about some things. That was a long time ago. And today she stands still as a warrior, a thoroughbred, fighting against these evils. Please welcome again, Reverend Liz.
Good evening, Detroit. It is good to be home. My mom grew up in Highland Park, Michigan, and Marion Kramer and Maureen Taylor are my mothers in the movement, so it is good to be home. We know the name of the sermon that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was supposed to preach the Sunday after he was assassinated. It was, "Why America is Going to Hell." Why America is going to hell. Now, if we fast forward 50 years, it seems like we might be in hell. Hurricane Irma has made Miami evacuate this afternoon. Houston is still underwater, and it is going to take an amazing amount of resources to get people back on their feet. Jeff Sessions today said that President Trump is going to revoke DACA. Yesterday, thousands of Fight for 15 workers were arrested fighting for 15 and a union when there's 400 families that make $197,000 an hour. There are 400 families in this country that make $197,000 an hour, and there are 65 million workers across this country who make that less than 15. That kind of inequality is hell. It's hell on earth for the vast majority of people. 1 in 2 Americans are poor or low income. 80% of us will struggle to pay our bills at some point in our lives. 43% of the U.S. children are going hungry. And we're in Detroit. Hundreds of thousands of us don't have water. Hundreds of thousands of us are being foreclosed from our homes. Thousands of kids are being taken away from their families. People are being poisoned with water that the General Motors Corporation said was rusting their car parts, and people still had to drink that water. Emergency managers are privatizing the schools, they're privatizing the libraries, they're privatizing the water, and they're making all of our public goods something to make money off of instead of to support life. America is going to hell. And as Maureen Taylor often says, Detroit is the canary in the mine. I don't need to tell you all that America is going to hell. But Dr. King said that there was a solution to this. We didn't heed it 50 years ago, but he talked about building a powerful movement of poor people across racial lines, across geographic lines, across gender lines, across issue lines. He said, right before he was killed, right when he announced that we needed to build a Poor People's Campaign, the dispossessed of this nation, the poor, both white and Negro, live in a cruelly unjust society. They must organize against the structures through which society is refusing to take means which have been called for and which are at hand to lift the load of poverty. There are millions of poor people in this country who have very little, even nothing, to lose. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that is a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. And then he says, beginning in the new year, we will be recruiting thousands of the poorest citizens to lead a sustained, massive, direct action movement. Those who choose to join this nonviolent army, this Freedom Church of the Poor, will work with us to develop nonviolent skills. So we are here in Detroit, Michigan tonight to say that we are picking up this campaign from where it left off. Poor people across this country are banding together. We're calling for massive civil disobedience. I'm here to ask you all, will you join us? Will you sign up? Will you commit to committing 40 days, starting on Mother's Day, May 13th of 2018, 40 days of nonviolent, direct action, civil disobedience in 25 states across the country and in Washington, D.C. We have been in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have been in Topeka, Kansas, and in Louisville, Kentucky. We have been in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and now we are in Detroit, Michigan. And I'm here to tell you that this country may be in hell, but it is ready to change. The people are ready to stand up and fight. So we have been talking about, I am particularly inspired by this quote that Dr. King has from the Massey Lecture Series that he gave on the Canadian Broadcasting System in December of 1967. This was right when he announced that we were going to build a Poor People's Campaign, and I think they have something to say for our world today. He says, "There is nothing wrong with a traffic light which says that you have to stop for a red light. But when a fire is raging, that fire truck goes right through that red light, and normal traffic had better get out of its way. Or, when a man is bleeding to death, the ambulance goes through those red lights at top speed. There is a fire raging now for the poor of this society. They are living in tragic conditions because of the terrible economic injustices that keep them locked in. Disinherited people all over the world are bleeding to death from deep social and economic wounds. They need brigades of ambulance drivers who will have to ignore the red lights of the present system until the emergency is solved. Massive civil disobedience is a strategy for social change which is at least as forceful as an ambulance with its sirens on full. So Detroit, are you willing to be an ambulance driver? Will you sign up to join our brigades of ambulance drivers and to stop and run through those red lights of injustice, those red lights of racism, those red lights of poverty, those red lights of ecological devastation, those red lights of voter suppression and emergency managers, those red lights of water pollution, those red lights of the cutting and denying of our education, those red lights of the deportation of our immigrant brothers and sisters? Are you ready to join this Poor People's Campaign? Are you ready to stand up for justice? Will you join us as we transform this society? Well, good, because we have some other folks that are ready. What we want to do now is hear a little bit from the people from the local community who are a part of this campaign, who are going to come and share their stories with us as a part of what we're doing to fight for justice and to come up with solutions to the problem. So what I want to do now is to call a number of the leaders who there's 4 folks from the community who are here with us this evening. And if they can all join me up front at the same time, and we'll have a chance to hear about the evils that this campaign is taking on. And those evils are systemic racism, those evils are poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy. And so if Valerie Jean, Nicole Hill, Gina Luster, and Joseph Green could come up here and share your testimonies with us, that would be most appreciated.
All right. Hello, family. Hello, community. I'm Valerie Jean. I live on the North End. I live in one of the many, many communities that were shut off completely by water. It is the practice of Detroit Water and Sewage Department they hired a Homrick, a contractor company, to go into whole neighborhoods and shut them off all at once. So in my community, when we were shut off, they came in early in the morning, 2 guys in a truck. They went systematically, 3 blocks, one house after the other, and shut them off. They did it very early in the morning, and as my community woke up, they woke up in complete despair. They couldn't, it was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter. Your whole community, nobody's valued. When they shut off a whole community at one time, it shows that water just simply isn't affordable to any of us. So when my community came together, we fought in the streets, we set up a water station, we helped each other, and we created mutual aid that is still going to this day. We're 3 years in mass water shutoffs. During these mass water shutoffs, we have blocked water shutoff trucks. We have set up mass marches. We marched through the street 1,000 people deep with nurses, where in that day, peaceful nurses, they used the LRAD on us. Yeah, in the streets, military weaponry for people just asking for water. So that's what it's like in Detroit for communities. If you fight back, they'll use military weaponry on you. So we're in this epic moment where we can all come together and refuse to let them shut off one more person and demand that water affordability be put on the table right now. Right now. We can't wait any longer. People die as we wait. So that's something that we have to do in mass. Now, they could not have came and shut off whole neighborhoods unless they had came and taken our democracy first. Michigan, on it. Michigan got an emergency manager, and the water department was the first to go. So they took away our democracy first. They couldn't have done that. They couldn't have taken away our water without our democracy. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina Luster, and I'm from Flint, Michigan. I'm sure everyone in this room has heard of Flint right about now. She just said so many of the things that I wanted to say about taking away our democracy, all those type of things. So I don't want to repeat what she said, but I'll tell my story. I moved away from Flint. I went to Wayne State University here in Detroit. I moved away from Flint for about 10 years. Came back to Flint and couldn't believe what I saw. It didn't look like the UAW Uniontown that I had left. Just that fast. I mean, my street was gone, my house was gone, my high school was gone. I had nothing to look at, nothing to show my daughter. And to wake up one morning and find out that we can't drink the water. Wow. I moved back home. It looks like a third world country, and now I can't drink the water. Isn't this something? So I'm watching TV, and I see people like Bishop Bernadette. Bishop, raise your hand. I see people like Melissa Mays. I see people like Art Reyes. I see these people on TV, and the snow is up to here. And they're all screaming, and their hair is all over their heads, and they got their babies with them. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Wow, what happened to my city? So, me being the person I am, I started inviting myself to these meetings because I wanted to know what was in the water, since no one seemed to know what was in the water. All we knew is we couldn't drink it. I invited myself to a couple closed-door meetings that I probably shouldn't have been in. And I just sat in the back of the room and act like I was supposed to be there. And people started talking to me. Next thing I know, I was invited to join Flint Rising. Wow. People wanted to hear my story, and they wanted to know, why is this young lady who's been gone for years back home, sitting in these meetings alone with hair in a bag? I would go with my hair and my daughter's hair. You know the freezer bags your grandmother used to freeze greens and peas in? Well, my daughter and I, at that time we had one, but now, 3 years later, we have about 4 of those bags. full of our hair. My hair used to be down to here. My daughter now, she's 9. This started when she was 5. That age where you don't need lead in your body. Now she's 9. She takes 50,000 units of vitamin D every day because she has none in her body. Dr. Mona, they can't figure out why. So, that's why I'm here. That's why I fight. I fight for the kids who can't speak for themselves, the parents who think that they can't leave their living rooms and say what they really want to say. I speak for those people and I represent them. And if you want to join us with Reverend Barbara, Flint, Detroit, so many other places. Now we got Houston to add on. Hey, let's get it together. Let's sign these papers and let's do what we got to do. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you coming out. And I'm proud to be part of the Poor People's Campaign. My name is Nicole Hill, and I just want to tell a little bit about my story about being a poor person in the city of Detroit. You are constantly raped by corporate greed, so-called democracy, utility companies, and I'm trying to put this nicely. I guess the best way to just be corporate greed and corporate sleaze like Dan Gilbert. I lived without my water, with it being cut off the first time in May of 2014. It was off for 2 months. They slated that I had a $5,000 water bill and never tried to investigate it any further than that. Upon investigation by myself, members of Michigan Welfare Rights, People's Water Board, We the People, and probably every other social justice organization within the state of Michigan, we discovered that most of the bill wasn't even mine. But to speak about what they do to poor people, my choice was deal with this bill or file bankruptcy. So I had to choose to ruin credit that I had had probably for the last 30 years. Good credit score, probably could have bought a house, probably could have bought a car. But I was always cautious with my credit and only did what was necessary to basically having a credit score where I probably couldn't pay for medical treatment if I needed it. So that's what the Poor People's Campaign is about. It's about fighting against injustices like that. And the thing is that even today with all of this going on, with what's going on in Flint with Gina and Melissa, and what's going on throughout the city, throughout the country, there are still people who choose to close their eyes to the situation. And that's what's really sad about all of this. I can't give a story like Valerie Jean and say that my community rallied around me because my neighbors acted like they didn't even know what was going on until it happened to them. And then it was, oh, she had her water cut off. Go to her, ask her. She'll know who to get in contact with. And of course, you know, me being who I am, I didn't say, oh, I'm gonna just turn my eyes the other way like you did. I referred them to the people that I knew could help them because that's the type of person I am. And that's the type of person I've learned that most poor people are. No matter how poor they are, they're always helping somebody else. And that's why, despite what's going on with Donald Trump, what's going on in this country, we are gonna win. You know, I'm confident in that. I believe in that. I believe in that. I really do. And the thing is that it shouldn't take it to happen to you for you to understand what's going on with the people in your community. I grew up in a community where you can do anything because somebody on whatever block you were on gonna be like, I know your mom, I know your grandma, I'm gonna tell her. oh, I know you guys are struggling. Here's some food. Here's some clothing. Here's some money if we have it. And everyone's stuck together, and that's not going on anymore. But it gives me inspiration just to see all of you here and know that there are people out there that still have that belief. And that if we stick together, we will conquer everything that's going on. I'm just, I'm proud to not be one of the 10% upper echelon, actually, because then I might have myself and my children be those same type of people that turn the other way and look the other way. So I'm proud to be a poor person, and I'm proud to be part of the Poor People's Campaign. Thank you.
Let's hear it for our testifiers.
Thank you. My name is Augustus Williamson, and this is Fred Patel, and we're going to do a number from Ragtime. It's about justice for all people. Go out and tell our stories, let them echo far and wide. Make them hear you, make them hear you. How justice was our battle and how justice was denied. Make them hear you. Make them hear you, and say to those who blame us for the way we choose to fight, that sometimes there are battles which are more than black or white, and I could not put down my sword, for justice was my right. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Go out and tell your stories to your daughters and your sons. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. And tell them in our struggles we were not the only ones. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Your sword could be a sermon or the power of the pen. Teach every child to raise his voice, and then, my brother, demanded by 10 million righteous men. Make them hear you. When they hear you, oh, they near you. Oh, yeah.
Hello, everybody. Now, the only reason we don't run this party all night long, because, we could have 50 songs, and we love singing, we love music, but we have a live stream audience. And so we don't want to tell you what to do in Detroit, but there's some people that's not going to stay on for a couple of hours. How many we got on?
11,000.
We already 11,000 people on. So if my staff has said we got to move forward and get Reverend Barber up, is not trying to tell you what to do. It's simply we got an audience that this is not Detroit, it's not Michigan, it's a whole country. And we are just modeling tonight the kind of mass meetings we hope you will have continuing up until the time that the Poor People's Campaign begins in May of 2017. So I want to ask everybody, are we handing out flyers now? Who's handing out flyers? Nobody should be handing out flyers, especially if they don't have anything to do with this. Okay, well, just leave the flyers off for a minute. All right? The only thing we want you to have is play. I'm funny about some things. I'm an organizer too. And just so everybody can come and grab a seat. The reason I didn't speak much at the beginning, because in the way we do the Forward Together Moral Movement, we believe that the people impacted should be the first voice. First voice. Because the goal is to put a face on the facts, right? To put a face on the facts. And as I said to the team today, we don't believe in helicopter leadership. We're not coming here to tell Michigan nothing to do. We just came here to invite Michigan and Ohio to be a part of this piece. We're going to leave, and you all have to do the organizing. But I want to suggest a few reasons why we believe it's time for a Poor People's Campaign and a national call for a moral revival. I want you to give it up for that serious sister named Dr. Liz Dior Harris. Isn't she a bad sister? And I want you to give it up for Sister Maureen, who can get anybody in the room, anywhere, anytime. Where's she at? I get them mixed up. Where is she? Oh, there she is. Both of them got that short hair going on. How y'all like Miss Yara Allen? Y'all like Miss Yara Allen? Amen. And she's got a whole group of songs we're teaching. In fact, we're having a training for musicians and artists in January in North Carolina, and people who will be the theomusicologists for the various movements in the various states. Now, is my Muslim brothers and sisters here? Where are you? Raise your hand. Assalamu alaikum. I intentionally, as a Christian minister now, particularly, always acknowledge my Muslim brothers and sisters publicly, because I will not allow, I cannot stand while other people try to isolate people. And it's important for me to say, I'm Muslim too. I'm Christian too. Anytime people are being targeted and oppressed, there's a scripture in Islam, in the Quran, that says the believers, both men and women, are in charge of and responsible for one another. They all enjoin the doing of what is right and forbid the doing of what is wrong. There's a scripture in the New Testament that both Jews, Muslims, and Christians honor because it actually flows out of the Old Testament prophets. And the three religions, those three actually honor the words of the prophets. And that one comes out of Isaiah. It says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because God hath anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now, one translation says to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. Another one says to declare that it's time for a breakthrough. And since we're on a college campus tonight, I don't know if I'm gonna holler, but I want to lecture real strong tonight and say that America is in need of a breakthrough. Now, it's interesting to me that that particular text, Sister Maureen, was written, where's she gone? She moves so fast. That particular text was written when it was written, the word poor comes from a word in Greek in this text that is patokos. Say that, patokos. And in a minute, I'm going to have the ministers come up, because one of our traditions in the moral movement is we never speak at a podium by ourselves. So when I do like that, some of y'all come up and stand with me. Patokos means, in Greek, those who have been made poor through systemic exploitation. Jesus gave the poor the preeminent space and in Jesus' mind, the poor were the primary target of inspiration and deliverance for God. Those, the Patokos. Now, Jesus in this text is in Nazareth, the ghetto, because Jesus was raised in the ghetto. Nazareth was the ghetto. And they said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And when Jesus was crucified, before he was crucified, he hid out in Bethany, which means the house of the poor. So Jesus was comfortable in the hood. And he was in the ghetto preaching, because the ghetto church in Nazareth had begun to believe the lies of domination. And that is that they had to take being poor and broken and imprisoned and bruised. And he comes saying, no, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, a power greater than the powers of this world, that releases you, good news, evangelicalism, good news, that you are free to stand against nonviolently the systems of poverty. When Jesus preached this sermon, pulling from Isaiah, Herod and Caesar were on the throne. Herod and Caesar both were narcissistic egomaniacs that loved to build towers and put their names on them. I don't know why y'all acting like that has some relevance. I'm just saying. And both Herod and Caesar told the people they oppressed, I and I alone can fix things. And it was in this context that Jesus preaches this message of liberation and declares that a new breakthrough has happened, is happening, and must happen. We are here for 2 days with moral leaders and poor people and activists for what has now been the 4th of 15 regional trainings, bringing together courageous and conscientious colleagues from 25 states and the District of Columbia. These 2 days we're spending it with Michigan and Ohio. Just a few days ago, we were with Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia. A few days ago, we were with Kansas and Missouri. We've been with Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Colorado. Next week, we're in Birmingham, Alabama. All over the country, we're coming together across all kinds of divisions, recognizing that systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy and the moral narrative of our nation must be challenged and it must be changed. That the poor must be galvanized, must speak, must be engaged in political power and shaping public policy. We cannot continue to have an electoral season anymore like we had this past election season, where there was not 1 hour of debate on either side of the aisle on poverty. Democrat or Republican, there was not 1 hour of debate on racism. There was not 1 hour of debate on ecological devastation, not 1 hour on the issue of the war economy, and not 1 hour dealing with the real moral issues. I mean, there are some that want to talk about things like being against the homosexual community and being against abortion and being for prayer in the school and trying to prove that Jesus is an original member of the NRA. But in this Bible that most people put their hands on, I carry this Bible, it's called the Poverty and Justice Bible. There are 2,000 scriptures in this Bible that talk about how you treat the poor and the least of these and the sick and the stranger and the prisoner. And if you cut all of those scriptures out, this Bible would fall apart. So we must declare we are about tired of people saying so much about what God says so little and so little about what God says so much. And if you're going to put your hand on the Bible and be sworn into office, then we're going to make sure you know what's in it. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly before God. That's in it. Ezekiel 22 is in it. Your politicians have become like wolves who are devouring the poor and the widows and the children, and your preachers cover up for them and declare things that the Lord has not said. Who will stand in the gap? I'm glad I'm old Southern boy that knows how to make the book talk. Because see, where I come from, when I was young, before you could grab a biscuit, you had to quote a verse. Somebody ought to talk to me. And I'm glad about that now, because I'm not ready to throw this book away. And when I see these folk going around and talking about they're praying for the president, I pray for presidents too. But you also have to challenge them, because you can't pray for a president alone while he's praying, P-R-E-Y-I-N-G, praying on the most vulnerable. You are called by prophets to stand up and challenge that. And you must say, as moral and religious leaders, that charity is not enough. Like now, there are folk going down to Texas and they're giving charity, and they should. There are corporations that are sending some charity, and they should. But when the cameras are gone, people are going to need more than charity. They need a living wage. They need universal health care. They need rules that protect them from corporations so that we don't treat corporations like people and people like things. And every nation is not going to be judged by charity. The Bible says, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you heal me? When I was a stranger, did you welcome me in? And it says the nations, not individual, but the nations will be judged by the policies that they implement on behalf of the least of these. And so we are moving around declaring that systemic racism, and by systemic racism, we don't just mean interpersonal relationships. We're not talking about, for instance, somebody having a black friend or not. And by systemic poverty, we don't mean people are poor because they're immoral. And if they learn how to live better, then they would be better. And by environmental devastation, we're not just talking about somebody who throws the cup out of the car while they're driving down the road. We're talking about those who weaponize water, like they did in Flint and other cities around the nation. And the war economy, we're talking about how we say we don't have any money, but then all of a sudden we find $2 trillion to fight a war we should have never been in the first place. And since I mentioned racism, and Charleston just happened, do you know that you can be against hate and still be a white supremacist? You can speak out against hate. See, you can actually denounce what that one person did in Charlottesville when they drove through. And you should. Well, you can denounce it unless you're the president. It takes you 2 or 3 days. But you know, you can deny, and most people will. They'll say, I'm not like that. But that's America's problem too. we've never really wanted to deal with race. The fact of the matter is, you can pull down the statues and the statutes still be up. You can denounce what happened in Charlottesville, but you've got to denounce what happened before Charlottesville that emboldened the people to go to Charlottesville. What am I talking about? You see, these statues, 80% of them were not put up right after the Civil War. 80% of those statues were put up between 1898 and 1922 to celebrate the resurrection and recodification of white supremacy. Those statues were put up not to celebrate the Civil War, but to celebrate Plessy versus Ferguson. To celebrate that there were no anti-lynching laws and black men were being lynched on an average of 1 per day between 1898 and 1922. They were put up, the statue in Charlottesville was commissioned in 1917. Now, what was going on in 1917? In 1914 or 15, Woodrow Wilson won the presidency. He was an open white supremacist. He got some black folk to vote for him. Because white supremacy can be supported by black folk who support white supremacy. He had black folk, and then the black folk went in and tried to get him to change on his decision to stop the desegregation of the federal government. And he threw him out of his office. His name was William Trotter, was one of the civil rights leaders. Then in 1916, Woodrow Wilson played Birth of a Nation. The movie called The Klansman, a book called The Klansman. It was turned into a movie called Birth of a Nation, which was one of the first movies that used sound. Birth of a Nation glorified the Klan and declared that black and white people who worked together between 1868 and 1880 to rebuild and change the South were actually bad for the country. And it caused the demise of the country. And that movie celebrated the Klan. And 100 years, almost exact to the date, before Bannon was ever in the White House, and alt-right was ever in the White House, Woodrow Wilson had white supremacy in the White House. He had his entire staff to watch it. Then he continued to stop the desegregation of the federal government. The statue in Charlottesville was commissioned in 1917, the year after, because the commissioners of the statue were celebrating that they finally had an open sympathizer for white supremacy and white nationalism in the White House. Could it be that the reason they want to protect the statue, and could it be that the Unite Right group planned that rally in Charlottesville because once again they believe they have a sympathizer in the White House, in the Justice Department, and leading the Senate and leading the House? Now you say, Reverend Barber, they didn't run that car through the crowd. I told you, white supremacy and white nationalism is not even about white people. Most white people aren't anywhere near that. And you actually have some black people that will, for whatever reason, will get up under people who support policies of white nationalism. See, white nationalism is about policy. Richard Spencer, who's one of the leading white supremacists, who actually has a couple of master's degrees, said that what drew him to Trump was that he heard what he said about immigration. He said in a speech after Trump won that we are children of the sun. It is natural for us to overcome and to rule. And we celebrate this election. He was the one that called the rally. You hear what I'm saying, nation. White nationalism, and so you can't have a senator. I bet you had senators from this state or representative from this state that said they denounced what happened in Charlottesville. It was horrendous. Well, that's good. But that doesn't mean you have denounced white nationalism. Let me ask you, have you denounced racist gerrymandering? Because that's white nationalism and white supremacy. Have you denounced voter suppression? Because that's white nationalism and white supremacy. Have you denounced putting in emergency managers without the vote of the people? That's white nationalism. Have you denounced purging the votes in Ohio? That's white nationalism. Have you denounced the racist attacks on health care and the racialization of health care by calling it Obamacare when it was really the Affordable Care Act, but you call it Obamacare to racialize it? Have you denounced Islamophobia? Have you denounced the attacks on immigrants? Have you denounced the attack on the gay community? Because all of that is the policies of white nationalism and white supremacy. And even if you black and you support those policies, you are in bed with white nationalism. That's why I'd rather stand with my white brothers and sisters that are against the policies of white nationalism than black folk that'll do anything just for a job. That's why we've got to have a movement where black people and white people and brown people and First Nation and gay people and straight people and Christian people and Jewish people and Hindu people and Muslim people and Sikh people and even people who don't believe in a religion but believe in the moral arc of the universe come together across our divisions and say we stand against systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and we will change the moral narrative of this nation. Donald Trump is not new. His election and his type of election is as American as apple pie. Donald Trump is a symptom. He's not the problem. He's a symptom of a larger moral malady. And the only way to change the system is to deal with it. And the only way we're going to deal with it in America is we've got to deal with the policies of racism and poverty and ecological devastation. You got to deal with it. And it can't be a partisan movement, Democrat or Republican. Can't be, I'm not saying that poor people don't need to be a power, we do. But you got to have a moral movement that can critique everybody. You see, you look at Ohio, there are 1.6 million people in poverty in Ohio. 1 out of every 5 children in Ohio is poverty. I didn't say black, I said children. Almost 1 out of every 5 women in Ohio are poor. 32% of black folk in Ohio are poor. 28% of First Nation. 26%, 1 out of every 4 Latino. 14% of Asian, 11% of white folk, but don't be fooled by that 11%, because that 11% means there are actually more poor whites. And 12 of the poorest states in America are so-called red states, where people use racial code words and racialized tactics to get elected and then pass policies that hurt mostly white people. That's why we got to have a unified movement. In Ohio alone, the war economy, $6.9 billion of Ohio's GDP goes to military spending. There are 866,000 war veterans. And one time, in a moment of epiphany, even Ohio's governor, a Republican governor, said that anybody who blocked expanding Medicaid, was engaged in war against the poor. In Ohio, some scientists say that the fracking is so bad it led to a 3.0 magnitude earthquake in Ohio. The Ohio River is the most polluted body of water in the country because of industrial chemical dumping. There are stats that say there are 342,000 people in Ohio that identify as LGBTQ, and 0% of them have public workplace and non-discrimination protections. And see, I'm one of these preachers that believe God made everybody. And folk were born as they are. You look around this room, you know some people got some noses they wouldn't have chose as they, and some feet, and some eyes, and some hips. You wouldn't have chosen that if you had a choice. God one day came up to me and gonna be hard funny with me, gonna say, I don't know how you hang out with those gay people because folk just choose to be like that. I said, well, when did you choose to be heterosexual? I mean, if that's the logic, when did you choose? But beyond all of that, equal protection under the law for everybody is non-negotiable. You want to throw away gay people, you got to throw away Langston Hughes. You got to throw away Bayard Rustin. You got to throw away Lorraine Hansberry. You got to throw away a whole lot of people. And I'm not willing to believe God made a mistake with 20% of his creation. Wish I had a witness here. And we all need to be together. In Michigan, you got 9.9 million people. 1.5 million of them are in poverty. 481,000 children. 47% of black children live in poverty. 30% of Latino children. There are 4 total women in poverty. 17% of women in Michigan live in poverty. Poverty by race. There are almost 1 million white people in poverty in Michigan. Almost 460,000 black people. So there are over 600,000, almost more white people in poverty in Michigan than black. But too often when you hear people talk about poverty, they talk about it in black terms, and that was by design. Tim Wise said that Tim Wise is a scholar, and he says that programs and so-called entitlement programs became racialized around about the 1960s and mid-60s, when the very programs that had helped a lot of whites up out of poverty, particularly in the Rust Belt and in the Wheat Belt, and even in the South, had lifted them out of poverty. All of a sudden, those programs were racialized to taint them as soon as black and brown people started benefiting from them. But the trick in that was there was a group of people that wanted to win elections, and so they wanted to pit people against one another, so that they could blame people for other people's problems. So they didn't offer people solutions, they offered them fear. But in the process of the fear, they would get elected on fear and then would use their power to give more money to the rich oligarchs. And the very people that elected them would get hurt even the more. Ecological devastation. You know, people talk about Flint, but I went over and I'm glad that I found out that folk knew that river was poison a long time. As they say, way back yonder. Way back yonder. Way back yonder. Way back yonder. Knew it. And then voter suppression. I was schooled today and said in Michigan, it might not, there's 2 kinds of voter suppression that goes on, and particularly in places like Detroit and New York, big cities, urban areas, and that is 1 day of voting. That's a form of voter suppression. That's 1 day of voting. Yeah, 1 day of registration, 1 day of voting, no same-day registration, no early voting, just 1 day. And then as somebody said, and then the other part is when you put people over people that people didn't elect. and then disempower the city council or the county commissioner. That's a form of voter suppression. You hear what I'm saying? And this past election that we've had, you know, people have been talking about Russia. I almost wish they would stop talking about Russia until they finish dealing with it and talk about the real thing that hacked our election, which was voter suppression. Because 22 states passed voter suppression laws since 2010. Those 22 states represent 54% of African Americans, 44 members of the United States Senate, and over half of the United States House of Representatives. There were 868 fewer voting sites in the black, brown, and poor community in 2016 than there were in 2014. Trump, for instance, won Wisconsin by less than 30,000 votes. 250,000 votes were suppressed. Long before the Russians did anything, racism hacked this system. And that's systemic racism. And people have to understand systemic racism is connected to systemic poverty. Because if people get elected by systemic racism and racialized tactics, usually once they get elected, they vote against the very policies that would uplift the poor and uplift working poor people and give people health care. So there's a direct connection, and we can no longer fight in our silos. Black folk over here, white people over here, Latinos over here, and gay folk over here. No, we need, first of all, a moral movement that examines policies from a moral perspective, that takes our deepest constitutional values, like promoting the general welfare, providing for the common good, establishing justice, as the critique, the lens through which we look at all policies, regardless of who proposes it, Democrat or Republican. Or we take our deepest religious values, like the text that says in Isaiah 10, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights and make women and children their prey. We need to lay that scripture on top of some of this legislation. We need a moral movement. A moral movement that's indigenously homegrown, that's, am I about through, that's led from the bottom up. A moral movement that's deeply state-based, that's anti-racist, anti-poverty, that's pro-justice. The moral movement that says this movement is not about saving the Democratic Party, it's about saving the soul of this nation. A movement that says keeping millions of people poor and from seeing a doctor and sick is not just bad policy. It's not left versus right. It's right versus wrong. It's immoral. It's hypocritical to kick hardworking people when they're down. It's wrong, as Liz said, to have 400 families making $97,000 an hour while we lock up people who simply want 15 and a union. It's wrong. It's wrong to take tax dollars and give it to the greedy. Take tax dollars and put them in private schools that can be resegregated, rather than making sure that every child has a right to a high quality, diverse, well-funded, constitutional public education. Living wages is a moral issue. Labor rights is a moral issue. Affordable housing is a moral issue. Safety nets for the poor, moral issues. Fair immigrant rights is a moral issue. Education for everybody, moral issue. Health care, not just saving Obamacare. We need universal health care as a human right for everybody. That's a moral issue. Protecting women's right to choose, that's a moral issue. Environmental justice and protection, that's a moral issue. Fairness in the criminal justice system by addressing the continuing inequalities that happen to black people, brown people, and poor white people is a moral issue. Fighting the proliferation of guns and telling the NRA you can't have this nation, that is a moral issue. Voting rights, women's rights are all moral issues. And then number two, there must be a moral movement committed to mass civil disobedience. I'm coming by to tell you, some of y'all can come up that were here today. Some of you all were in. Come on up around. Come on up around. I believe we're in a season now, y'all, where just sending another tweet ain't gonna do it. Sending another email and writing another letter. No, we need a movement today where the people impacted by the policies, the people impacted by immoral and unjust policies, are joined with clergy, joined with advocates who are willing to put their bodies on the line. I said to the group today, whenever you're in a season and the leadership has decided to crucify the poor, crucify the sick, crucify the least of these, crucify the immigrant, crucify the Muslim, every crucifixion needs a witness. It needs a witness. And it's time that we build a movement. And what if for 40 days, from Mother's Day next year to the summer solstice, we don't have a commemoration, because we don't need any more commemorations. I'm not going to any more commemorations. Remember what folk did back then. It's time for us to ante up. It's time for those that were there for the first time to suit up one more time. God has kept you alive, to suit up one more time. It's time for those of us who weren't there but live off the struggles of others to suit up for the first time. And it's time for the young ones that are going to have to deal with the future that this mess produces to suit up as well. And what if for 40 days in 25 states plus the District of Columbia, 1,000 people in each state and the 2,500 in the District of Columbia would commit to civil disobedience in state houses and in Ryan's office and McConnell, not Trump, but the places where the laws are made. And what if we were in there in all of our diversity? And what if we had an agenda called the Souls of Poor Folk Agenda? And what if we for a moment put down our organizational egos and said, since we're all being beat together, we might as well always stand up together? Could you imagine? And what if we didn't choose Michigan gonna do it at 5 and Ohio gonna do it at 4? What if we all chose the same time? So we would be like an eclipse. But not an eclipse of darkness, an eclipse of light. But we need some light to cover over some of this darkness. Because see, the first thing we got to do is break through the narrative. Because right now, the issues we concerned about, you don't even hear them. On CNN, MSNBC, and you don't hear them. And sending an email is not going to get them there. Just having another rally. But what if they saw older white women going in with young black women and young Latinos and clergy and people impacted, and we went in and we sat in and won't be moved, and we had a reason, not just knee-jerk civil disobedience, but a reason, an agenda. And we break through the narrative. Well, somebody said, Reverend Barber, it wasn't Liz, they said, you a preacher, and there ain't no scripture in the Bible that calls that to happen. Well, yes it is. Actually. It's a scripture that Dr. King used to quote a piece of it. But let me read it to you in the Message Bible and tell you why we've got to have a season of civil disobedience. That's not all we've got to do. We've got to have legal action. We have to have a long term. 40 days is not going to change everything. But do you know in the Bible, anytime you did something 40 days, something shifted. Something shifted. And the Bible says in Amos, the Old Testament, Rabbi, step up here because I don't want to mess up this Hebrew. I'm going to try to do it in the Message Bible, but if I'm wrong, you not me. Whatever you got to do, you correct me. You know what I'm saying? Here's Amos 5 in the Message Bible. It says, people hate this kind of truth talk because raw truth is never popular. But here it is, bluntly spoken, talking to the leaders then. It says, because you have run roughshod over the poor, and because you take the bread right out of their mouths, you're never going to move into the luxurious homes you built at Mar-a-Lago. I'm switching around. You're never going to, help me, Rabbi, help me. Let me stay in the 6th century BC. You're never going to move into the luxurious homes you've built. This is Amos. You're never going to drink the wine from the expensive vineyards you've planted as a nation. Because I, God, know precisely the extent of your violations. I know the enormity of the sins of your nation, and they are appalling. This is your sin. You bully right living people. You take bribes right and left. And you kick the poor when they're down. This is Amos chapter 5, verse 12. Verse 13, justice is a lost cause. Evil is epidemic. Decent people sometimes throw up their hands and believe that protest is useless and a waste of breath. But I need somebody that will seek good and not evil and live. You talk about God as a nation, God being your best friend, God blessing you. Well, live like it. And maybe it will happen. Verse 15. If you want God to be God's friend, hate evil, love good, and then get out in the public square. Leave the temple and get out in the public square. And if you get out in the public square, maybe the God of the angel armies will notice there's a remnant. Not everybody, but a remnant that's willing to work it out in the public square. Now, here is again the message. Go out into the streets, this is verse 16, and cry loudly. I need a remnant that will fill the malls and fill the shops with the cries of doom. I need a remnant that will weep loudly. I need a remnant that will empty the offices, the stores, the factories, the workplace. I need a remnant that will call everybody in the nation to cry over the sins of hurting the poor and hurting the least of these. God says, I want to hear a loud cry. And when I hear a cry, then I'll make my visit. Could it be that God wants to change America? But God needs us to get in the street. God needs us to prove that we're serious. He doesn't need us in the street with guns. He doesn't need us in the street with weapons. He just needs our tears and our bodies. Could it be that we have the power for a breakthrough? That's all I came to say to Michigan. Tomorrow we're going to finish the training. And then Liz and I are going on to 3 more states. Pray for us because we got 10 more to do. But I just believe it's time for a breakthrough. Everybody's chasing the tweets and chasing the shiny object. But we need a breakthrough. We need a poor people's campaign. A national call to moral revival. We've got to break through the money. Do I have a witness? We've got to break through the silence. Do I have a witness? We've got to break through the bad theology. We've got to break through the lies. We've got to break through the policies. We've got to break through the hate until every child is educated, until the sick have health care, until the poor are lifted, until voting rights are secure. And this is my final word. We might not change everything next year. But Liz told me, she said, I've got to do this. Because if I don't do it, then I've wasted living. And I told her, I've got to do it. And others have got to do it. Because if you don't stand up for justice, you might as well be dead. We might not change everything. But I know we won't change anything until poor people and clergy and advocates get together. So I'd rather try to change and die trying than to live and not do anything. Do I have a witness? We need a breakthrough. We want a democracy that protects the rights of everybody. Somebody shout breakthrough. We want one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. Somebody shout breakthrough. We want a nation where all of God's children are seen as special and loved and important. Say breakthrough. And you need to understand that the rejected have to lead the revival. That the broken have to lead the breakthrough. Can I holler for a second? I'm sorry. But I feel my Georgia, North Carolina coming out. When Pharaoh was on the throne, another narcissistic tower builder, God got Moses to get the people together, and they had a breakthrough. When Nebuchadnezzar was on the throne, another narcissistic tower builder, he got Shadrach, Meshach, and that bad Negro together, and they had a breakthrough. When Caesar and Herod was on the throne, they crucified Jesus, but early Sunday morning, there was a breakthrough. When slavery was around, Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison and Henry Thoreau, they got together and had a breakthrough. When women didn't have the voting rights, then Sojourner Truth and Mother Jones and other women got together, they had a breakthrough. When Jim Crow was ruling the land, they had Emmett Till's mama and Dr. King and Rosa Parks and others that were here today, and they had a breakthrough. When apartheid looked like it had everything wrapped up, Mandela and Tutu and others got together and had a breakthrough. And I believe the same God that helped people back then is still alive in the universe today. And if we get in the street in America, we'll see a breakthrough. Somebody holler breakthrough. Somebody say, I'm living for a breakthrough. I heard a song and it says there's an army rising to break every chain. Touch your neighbor, say, neighbor, I'm in the army. I'm a soldier. Tell your neighbor, I'm a soldier in the army of the Lord. And I promise God that I serve the cause of justice until I die. There's an army rising. Are you in it? 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 Say breakthrough. 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 Hallelujah. While you're standing, grab somebody by the hand. If you're listening by camera, we got these cards. You can go to Poor People's Campaign. You go to Poor People's Campaign. You go to breachrepairers.org and click and go to Poor People. You go to Kairos, click on Poor People's. But tonight, we need 1,000 people in Michigan that ain't scared of the power of this world, because you believe there's a greater power. Who are willing to not just be mad at the folk at your state capitol, but to go in and sit down and join another 25,000 people across the country and know that if we do this right, some of our enemies are going to become our friends. Because there's a redemptive power when you cry right, when you stand right. There's a breakthrough. We need an army. Do you have your card tonight? Have you filled it out? Come here, Liz. If you filled your card out and said whatever you want to do, but if you certainly said, I'm willing to be trained in how to do this. This is nonviolent. We don't have to use the weapons of carnal weapons. This is a moral movement. We're looking for folk who are willing, that don't have to be convinced that we have to take a stand, even if they keep voting against us for a season, and that we don't need to have a commemoration. We're not talking about commemorating the Poor People's Campaign. We're talking about launching. And after the 40 days and 1,000, we're talking about going back in our states, building power. And everything you build here will stay. And we're not talking about putting all the leadership under Liz or under me. We're just conduit. We're just servants. That's all. If you're here tonight and you signed the card, hold them up. Hold them up. Look how many have already said they want to sign up. Now pass them to the end of the road, to the inside. Pass them to the inside. On both sides, and Liz is going to pick them up. We went to one place and they said people won't sign up for civil disobedience, and 500 people signed up. I said, don't speak for the people. Dr. King said, I'm looking for people that have nothing else to lose. And all they have left is to stand up and say, I will not be ignored. Otto Schwammer at MIT said the worst kind of violence we experience today is attention violence. Look at politicians won't even say the word poor. We've got to break through that. We've got to break through that. 52 years after the Voting Rights Act, we have less voting rights today than we had 52 years ago. We got to break through that. It took us 400 years from 1619, 398, from 1619 to now to get to 725. We can't wait another 400 years to get to 15. You ever thought about it like that? It took us 400 years to get to 725. And 250 of those years, folk worked free. You had full employment and no money. And now people say, wait for 15 when the minimum wage ought to be 20. When corporate leaders are making 350 times more, and we're not mad at you, we just saying stop being so greedy. You couldn't make the money if people didn't do the work. We got to take care of this earth. Where are we going to go, Mars? We can't stand aside. We're going to meet with the 500 tribes. I'm going in September. We're going to have pipe with the 500 tribes. They're coming in. Yeah, it's time. We're going down to the Rio Grande, going down to the border. A few weeks I'm going to Alaska to meet with the indigenous people. We call them Eskimo, but the indigenous people there, folk are ready. Now, not everybody, but the Lord says if I can get a remnant. Is there any more cards? Look at all those cards. People saying they're ready. And this will be diverse and steady. I can't tell you all the days yet because we don't want to tell them everything. We right now, what we need is 1,000 people to get trained, to get ready. Michigan, you gonna get ready? Ohio, you gonna get ready? Is there an army rising? You know how to say that, y'all? Are you too tired? Sing it, brother. Do you need the mic? Yeah. Hallelujah. You know that? Hallelujah. You know it? Where's he at? Come here, baby. Who is it? You know it?
Break every chain. Break every chain.
Say it with us. Hold it. Oh.
Break every chain.
Break every
chain.
Put your hands in the air.
Every chain.
There's an army.
Break every chain.
Break every chain.
Break every chain.
We're going to break through walls.
Break every chain.
Come here, baby. Get up here. Come here.
Break every chain. Break every chain.
Give her a hand. Come on, give her a hand. Tell him, come.
Break every chain.
Break every chain. Break
every chain.
There's an arm.
Break every chain. Break every chain. Break every chain.
You got it. You got it.
There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up.
There's an army.
Woo!
me that's how we're gonna go. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks so much. We know this is the beginning of a fight, and we will be back and we will do more. So safe travels home, and if you haven't turned in your cards, you can bring them up to the front.
Hang on,